Welcome to Your Next Chapter, where we feature audio creators and industry leaders shaping the future of podcasting. My name is JT, Jeremiah Tittle. I'm the CEO and founder of Next Chapter Podcasts. This season, we're exploring museums. How are they using podcasts to build trust, to share their story, their stories, I should say, and reach wider audiences, making the case that every museum needs a podcast. Whether you're in audio, museums, anywhere in that Venn diagram, there's something for you to learn. Today, I'm joined by Franky Abbott, someone I know well. She's the Chief Content Strategist at Levine Museum of the New South and co-executive producer with myself of our award-winning podcast, Our New South. We recorded this conversation live at the American Alliance of Museums Conference in LA, diving into the power of digital storytelling, building a national audience from their home base, the museum based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and what makes a podcast team truly work. Let's get into it. I'm very happy to be now at AAM, the museum conference in Los Angeles, speaking to someone I know well, and we don't get together often enough in the same place. We're often on Zooms, but is the Chief Content Strategist for the Levine Museum of the New South, Franky Abbott. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
I want to start off the conversation today with you about the theme of this conference, which I feel like is the perfect jumping off point for talking about podcasts, because museums and trust. There was a study done that verified that museums are the most trustworthy medium, which is saying a lot. And I think podcasts are an opportunity for storytelling, and they're also an opportunity to build a connection with people that might not otherwise get exposed to these stories. And Levine Museum of the New South is telling stories in a number of different ways, using a number of different media. Just wondering, from your perspective, what you think that connection is between the trustworthiness of museums and likewise for podcasts.
Well, yeah, you're right that museums have, in any sort of like assessment of public trust, museums are always highly rated, and they actually have held on to that title, interestingly, in this sort of age of like misinformation and disinformation, which is fascinating, as people's sort of esteem for journalism has tanked, which is unfortunate. And I think that podcasts, depending on who's making them, but also probably a little bit in general, like hold a fascinating middle ground, right? Sometimes they get associated with sort of news and partisanship and current events, but I think when museums can bring an element of trust to a podcast, that's a cool thing. Of course, many other kinds of organizations can also bring an element of trust to a podcast. But that's like a cool synergy, because my beef with museums is that they are so, they're very locked into physical space. And so the metric for success at any museum is like, how do you get people into your building? And yet museums have been pretty slow, even in the world of cultural heritage, so with libraries and archives and all those kinds of institutions, to really get out and try to leverage their trust and opportunities for storytelling for a much broader audience. So like, what would it mean if you were not just sitting in your building attracting tourists and local communities to come consume your work, but you were actually getting out there in the public square, using your expertise, doing your storytelling, like I said earlier, sort of modeling the conversations that you would like people to be having on subjects, bringing facts into the mix, and also using your spotlights to sort of highlight elements of history and culture that are historically marginalized, less often discussed. Like, I think that is a really powerful thing that museums could be using platforms like podcasts to do, and yet, I think have been a little slower to warm up to that in some ways, particularly with big audience reach ambitions, right? And then thinking about podcasts in a much more involved way than just, this is a supplement for our exhibit, or we're going to do this to show behind the scenes of what we do.
We co-executive produce Our New South. We just found out we won another award for this podcast. It's pretty exciting to work on this with you. It's a joy. When this whole thing began, there's an open-mindedness to kind of expanding the digital footprint for the museum. Just wondering, where that came from and how important was it to you to find an audience that wasn't necessarily down the street in Charlotte, North Carolina?
So I think it's actually a pretty common thing for a good number of museums to have really started to make investments in digital things very suddenly during COVID, which I think is unfortunate because it means that people associate digital things with the sort of oppressive nature of the COVID time, and then their attention is somewhat like retracted from some of that. For me personally, though, and for Levine Museum, they hired me because I had digital background, although it was not so much background in digital media. It was like experience design, so on the web and app development. And they started to really push forward with this idea of being digital first, which is like really important terminology for a thing that gets misunderstood a lot, which is the idea that for many people, the way that they first encounter an institution like the museum is going to be online via your podcast, looking at your website, hearing about an event that you're doing, again, digitally, looking on social media. It's not actually going to be that they just happen to be walking by your building and they come check you out and then they follow you online, right? So the idea that digital stuff really is, in some ways, a gateway to brand awareness and all kinds of other things. So I think that they had gotten interested in that idea, but they really weren't working on very many projects. When I came there, the museum had like the most basic WordPress website. And we had the ambition to do what at that time was sort of some digital experimentation. And we wanted to do that both in that experience lane, which I had more experience with, and then also in the digital media lane. And so we got a grant from the Knight Foundation to do 3 projects. One was a walking tour app of a neighborhood that was raised by urban renewal in the 60s in Charlotte called Brooklyn. So you could see, using augmented reality, some of the sites and other things in that neighborhood. The second was a project you've heard Cliff talk about, which is 50 Places in Charlotte, which spotlights a different place in the city every week for 50 weeks. That was kind of last year. And then the podcast, which was like the biggest probably of the 3 projects in terms of time and time commitment. And then we sort of figured out we'd assess our direction after we had done those experiments. So we got to work with you sort of halfway through that 3-year grant and do the project at the end. But I think it's really been transformative for us. I don't think anyone at the museum really believed that we could pull off a project for a truly regional and national audience. I think they thought our best eggs were in the Charlotte basket and we should stay in the Charlotte basket and we really shouldn't be trying to do something more ambitious. And so the podcast, it has done many things, but one of them is that it's been this big proving ground for sort of if we work with the right partners and we have the right kind of storytelling message, partners including all the Next Chapter folks and Kevin and Robert, our hosts, we can really be talking to very different people than we're used to talking to, and that's a positive thing.
One of the questions that we were asked on the panel, the roundtable we were on together, was about what does the team look like that makes up, just all the smart people that come together to build an award-winning podcast. I know I'm not the best at everything, not even that many things, but I really like working with a great team. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed working with you and Levine has been the team members that you have on your side, that we can't do this alone. Executive producer is a great title, right? But, without all the folks that support us and have great ideas, and I just love how much the podcast has been kind of a democratization of these ideas and really given people a chance to argue who their favorite hip hop artists who should come on the Our New South podcast or what have you. So it's really been a joy to work on with you. And I guess getting to the question, it has to do with, I think I took a photo of one of our Zoom calls, which is like Hollywood squares of, I think even more than the 9 squares at times that we've had, just so many talented people working with us. So, Yeah, there's really not a question coming out of this. It's just any comments on that?
Sure. I mean, I think it's an interesting. When we started the project, I think I knew enough to know that we didn't really understand what we needed because we didn't really know anything about podcasting, let alone all the different pieces of that, from production to editing and the whole marketing, the whole nine. But I knew that we knew some things about the concept of the New South, obviously. So that was like a piece of what we were bringing to the table. But, then we work with somebody like Robert, who's an amazing historian. And so it's also like an opportunity to, it's been, to your point, like so much more than just kind of like we make it and then you all produce it and edit it, right? Like it has been a really cool kind of team experience that I have found really valuable. And, I guess it sounds probably simple to say because you all work on lots of projects like this, but, the form and the content are this sort of iterative thing, right? Certain content ideas are completely impacted by the way they're delivered, the question that someone responds to, the way we edit things. Like the whole thing really is sort of a mix. And if the communication isn't good, the product isn't good. And so I do think the podcast is like pretty amazing because all of us have worked pretty well as a team. And when a team works well, you make a better product. So that's been great for us as well. Like I knew from the beginning that if we like got on, not to belittle anybody who does this, but if we got on Zoom and like recorded ourselves talking to people we knew in Charlotte, that's cool. And we would produce something that probably not a lot of people would engage with, right? And so from the beginning, it was like this more audacious idea. But we really lucked into like a great team working with you guys and with the choices for hosts and everything. So I do think I get the feeling in our team meetings that it's like everybody's learning from everybody else kind of all of the time, right? At the level of the content idea, the guest, what order should we do this in? What should the main idea be? Is that really a viable topic? And then the ongoing question of like, what would our sense of the public be interested in, and how do we counterbalance that against things we sometimes really want to do? Whether we think other people would be interested, we think they should be interested, right? And so like negotiating all those dynamics about the audience and the content and all that stuff.
So I was going to ask you, just kind of going back to the beginning, in the very beginning, it's kind of the hardest part, pre-launch. You're figuring stuff out. You get better. We did with season 2, I think, in a lot of different areas. And I think a lot of credit goes to you in really doing a lot of debriefs and thinking about, okay, what worked, what didn't, how do we improve from a season 1 to a season 2 and grow. But I want to go back to the beginning to Tressie McMillan Cotton. So she was a New York Times columnist. She's at UNC as a professor and running a department, if I'm not mistaken, journalist who is the type of person whose columns have been, I don't know if they're framed, but at least on the wall as some of the employees at Levine Museum. She ends up being our first guest and really setting the tone of this series. I'm just curious, from your perspective, what does she mean to Levine, and what was that like, kind of kicking off with her? Do you think?
Oh gosh, it was so cool to talk with her. I mean, I have, as you know, like known her from afar from grad school. So just in a personal way, it was exciting to sort of have like a past life reconnect with the present life. Her work is amazing. Her public intellectual work is also amazing, in addition to her other kinds of work. And it was just so cool to have somebody who had just within the last year published a thought piece that I think was motivated by that show about sororities at Alabama. Do you know what I'm talking about? Bama something. Yeah. She was writing an editorial response to that in the New York Times, and she talked a lot about the South as this sort of bellwether for the nation, right? Like as the South sort of has its flashpoints and its problems, that those are reflective of sort of the nation writ large, right? And if the South can make progress in resolving some of those issues, that in fact, like it's a sign of the positive for the nation, right? Like the South can be a leader in that way. So we all loved that column, although we did not watch the show so much about the sororities at Bama. We were aware of her, and actually, I had known about her that she spent a significant part of her youth in Charlotte, and so it was so cool to be able to have somebody come on who was of the generation of people. We also had Decker Yongang, who came on later, who was kind of part of the generation of people who are my age in Charlotte and participated in the Swan decision kind of busting around the city. That was an attempt to sort of desegregate schools in a longer term way that vanished by the late 90s, but like that, those were people who came up in schools. Tressie had some memories of Levine Museum and going there and its identity in the city, and also had some really interesting things to say about the New South and all of the sort of complications of that as a term, right? The ways in which that is like a hopeful idea and then also feels sometimes like a relic of the past, ironically, and other things. So like she was such a great person to have on as a kickoff.
It's been just a wonderful series to work on, and excited for the future. I wanted to ask you, you may have shared a story or two with me, but maybe there's some that you have in your back pocket around just the anecdote of, someone reaching out to you and saying, that they enjoyed the show. Whether it was random, someone you know, someone who knows someone you know who reached out and just really has enjoyed the show that we put together that made you feel good. I would love to hear about that.
Sure. I mean, gosh, it's really an interesting... So my own background is in Southern urban history. And so I sort of live in the world of, or have lived in the world of like museum and academic people who study the South. And many of them have like come upon Our New South, listened to it, loved it, sent me messages about it, and then like because they realize it's not till the very end when they hear my name in the credits that they're like, there aren't that many Franky Abbotts, right? Or once they hear the name, they're like, oh, it's you who study the South, right? It's not a huge community of people, and so I have gotten like emails from those folks. I know Rich is always getting praise for Our New South in the world of sort of museum CEOs that he trucks in, like people who kind of have heard the show and think it's so cool. We've also had a good number of people who've come into the museum who have said, oh, by the way, like I listened to your podcast, I love it. Some who have like been longtime attendees of the museum and come to our programs and things like that, so they probably heard about it from us. But other people who like are tourists visiting Charlotte and listen to Our New South, and then maybe it motivated them to come to the museum. I don't know if it did or not, but they sort of mentioned it on the visit. Oh, we love this so much. We thought it was such a great show. So that's all really cool. One of my best friends, is always giving me also episode by episode reviews, unsolicited. But she is a huge fan of the show as well, and so it's like she's also very good at listening right when it comes out, which is probably before I'm awake East Coast time. So that's fun. I thought that you were going to talk about what we started with as raw materials for the show, Please. If you remember, which is basically that we came to you just for folks thinking about getting in the business of podcasting and working with a partner like Next Chapter. We came to you and said, like, we would like to do a podcast. I mean, nobody knew anything more than that. It was like, well, we want to do a podcast. I think that you had made a proposal to us about sort of 10 episodes and a season and that kind of thing, but like, I remember in season 1, we went through a lot of like long conversation about like, what is the main idea of this? And then we tried to spend some time on the title, and then the title didn't really come. And then we spent some time on the hosts after we had the concept. And then one of the hosts thought of the title, Robert. Yeah. So it all worked out in the end. But yeah, I mean, I think about like how much progress we made as a group towards a thing when we really started with, everybody's expertise, but no really solid idea. I mean, we eventually happened upon the New South idea, but I think there were other things that we entertained as core ideas for the podcast. So, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap this up on a conversation that begins with, here's our goal, here's what we hope to get out of making a podcast together. Here's how we hope it helps the museum. Here's how, we envision the show may go, but we'll find out as we go. Like, we have the opportunity with a bunch of smart people in a room to, kind of yield to each other, allow people to share ideas, and then come up and I think when we combine all of those with respect, we can get to a place where we, the sum is greater than each individual part, right? So really proud of it, and it's been such a joy to work with you. I think I started there. We could have made this a comedy podcast instead.
Won a major award.
Now that we've won another award, so proud of it, and so great to be here at the conference with you. Thank you for being a great partner.
Yeah, no, you too. It's been great to work with you.
If you're interested in learning more about our Next Chapter Accelerator program, please go to nextchapterpodcast.com/contact and we'll reach out. Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Next Chapter. I'm your host, JT. Our executive producer is Nick Kastner. This is edited by Justin Cortese. We drop episodes every other week. Please follow the show. And thanks for listening.